I gave my daughter a house as a wedding gift, thinking her marriage would be something to celebrate. Elegant, joyful, everything a mother could hope for. But before the ceremony even took place, that so-called son-in-law showed up with his entire family, parents, brother, sister-in-law, all moving in like they owned the place. First thing out of their mouths. "We'll take the master bedroom. She can handle all the chores." I thought this was going to be a marriage. Turns out they saw my daughter as nothing more than a live-in maid. But here's what they didn't see coming. They got smug way too soon, and realized far too late. My daughter is no one's stepping stone. And in the very next breath I made sure every last one of them shut their mouths. My daughter's boyfriend, Curtis Miller, seemed like a decent guy. Polite, attentive to Natalie, the kind of boyfriend any parent might cautiously approve of. But his family. That was another story. No house, no car, and certainly no financial contribution to the wedding. His parents lived in a remote town working as farmhands, while his brother and sister-in-law barely scraped by with odd jobs in the city. Thomas and I had our doubts about this relationship from the start. But Natalie was in love. Deep, stubborn, hopelessly in love. She pleaded, coaxed, and insisted until eventually we caved. Wanting to ensure she wouldn't struggle after marriage, we gifted her a beautiful house in the Boston suburbs. A standalone home fully renovated down to the last detail. Thomas personally oversaw everything, pouring hundreds of thousands of dollars into custom designs, hand-picked finishes, and the best contractor's money could buy. On the day the renovations were completed, he was so excited he practically dragged me to see the final result. But before we even stepped inside, an unmistakable shrill voice rang through the house. "My God, is this neighborhood a prison? Every house has its doors shut. How am I supposed to visit the neighbors if no one leaves their doors open? Curtis, go tell them to be more neighborly and stop shutting everyone out. And that front gate, what the hell is that? Looks like a damn fortress. Bars locked up so tight like we're guarding a bank. What happens when our relatives visit? Are they supposed to wait outside like beggars? Curtis, get some workers over here and tear that ridiculous thing down." I didn't even need to see her to know. It was Curtis's mother, Mrs. Miller. A slow, simmering anger started to build in my chest. Curtis had brought nothing to this marriage. Not a home, not a car, not even an engagement ring. Natalie had quietly bought one herself just to keep us from worrying, claiming it was from him. Of course we found out later. But in the end Thomas and I chose to let it go. At least we thought they loved each other. What infuriated me most was how his parents reacted when they found out. Instead of gratitude or embarrassment, they scoffed, calling Natalie wasteful. A ring was just a formality, they argued. Why throw money away on something so unnecessary? And now, standing at the threshold of this house, our house, listening to this woman complain like she was inspecting some run-down motel, I could feel my patience wearing thin. Natalie, ever the peacemaker, attempted to keep things civil. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller, there's a wonderful community center nearby. If you're looking for company, there are game nights, social events, lots of opportunities to meet people." Mrs. Miller wrinkled her nose. "Card games? Please. You think we haven't played cards before?" Then, as if we were invisible, Curtis's parents wandered off to explore, peeking into rooms, inspecting furniture, acting like they already owned the place. Not a single word of greeting. Not a glance in our direction. Natalie froze, caught between politeness and disbelief. Even Thomas, usually the calmer one, looked completely thrown. Sensing my expression darken, Curtis rushed over, whispering, "Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson, I know my parents can be lively. They just speak loudly, that's all. But please, I promise, they really do love Natalie." Before I could respond, a loud, booming laugh echoed from the master bedroom. "Now this is a damn fine room." Mr. Miller's voice. For a split second I allowed myself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they were finally appreciating what we had done for Natalie. Then I stepped inside and my breath caught in my throat. There was Mrs. Miller, sprawled across the brand new bed like she owned it, legs crossed, shoes still on. The fresh, crisp sheets were already streaked with dirt from the soles of her worn-out sneakers. And next to her, Mr. Miller, casually lighting a cigarette, inside my daughter's new home. Before I could even speak, he pressed the burning tip against the solid wood nightstand, snuffing it out like it was an old ashtray. A dark, charred mark immediately appeared on the polished surface. Thomas's jaw clenched so tightly I thought he might crack a tooth. Natalie, visibly embarrassed, nudged Curtis, silently begging him to intervene. But he only lowered his head, shoulders hunched, looking like a scolded child. Not a word. Not a single protest. And then, as if the audacity wasn't already at its peak, Mr. Miller stretched his arms, let out a satisfied sigh and said, "This room is perfect. Lots of sunlight, great view. We'll take this one." I nearly swore out loud. For a moment I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe my ears were playing tricks on me. But no. They had just waltzed into my daughter's home, taken one look around and decided to claim the master bedroom. Thomas, Natalie, me. All three of us stood frozen, too stunned to speak. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an invasion. Mr. Miller strolled out of the master bedroom, barely acknowledging our presence, and wandered into one of the smaller rooms. His eyes swept across the space before he nodded in apparent satisfaction. "This one's perfect. Just right for our grandson." He turned to Curtis without hesitation. "Call your brother, tell him to cancel his lease. He and Jenna should move in with Luca right away." Then, as if deciding the matter was already settled, he continued, "We'll put the house in Travis's name. That way Luca will have a stable home when he starts school here. As for you and Natalie, you can come back and live here once you have kids. Until then, no rush." I felt my last shred of patience snap. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, Thomas grabbed my wrist, giving me a small shake of his head. He wanted to see if our daughter could handle this herself. If she couldn't set boundaries now, what future could she possibly have with this family? I exhaled sharply and turned my gaze to Curtis. The boy who had always seemed well-mannered, well-spoken, respectable in our presence, stood there with his head down, spine curled inward, not uttering a single word. A puppet without strings. Natalie, however, had reached her limit. Her voice turned cold. "This house was a gift from my parents. It's not a boarding house for your entire family. Don't you think you're crossing the line?" The room tensed. Mr. Miller's expression darkened, a puff of smoke shooting aggressively from his nostrils as his voice sharpened. "Your house." His lip curled. "You really think this place belongs to you? This is my son's home, which means it's our home. And you have the nerve to talk back to your future father-in-law before you're even married? What, you planning to throw us out once you've got a ring on your finger?" He let his gaze sweep over the room, then scoffed. "Travis is still wasting money on rent every month. This house is huge. It's a shame to let all this space go to waste. Why shouldn't they move in?" Mrs. Miller chimed in instantly, her voice taking on a shrill edge. "I get it, I do. It's your wedding house. But be honest, isn't it a little ridiculous? Two people living in a whole damn mansion." She jabbed a finger toward the smaller room. "What's the big deal if Lucas stays here? You don't even have kids yet. Why let a perfectly good room sit empty?" Then, as if this was all some grand act of generosity, she added, "We're not trying to take advantage of you, sweetie. We just don't want you two struggling alone. We came here to help, to support you. You should be grateful." And then, as if sensing how icy our expressions had become, she turned her focus to Natalie and smirked. "Besides, you're about to be my daughter-in-law. It's only right that you take care of us. Cooking, cleaning, you're responsible for making sure we're comfortable. Don't get any ideas about slacking off just because you're the bride." My fingers curled into fists. Natalie's hands trembled at her sides, her breath coming sharp and fast. And still Mrs. Miller wasn't done. "Honestly, looking at you, I can tell you're not much of a housekeeper. Why don't you save yourself the trouble and have your father hire a maid to take care of us instead?" Natalie's entire body stiffened. Tears welled in her eyes, but instead of falling, they burned, hot, angry. And then finally she snapped. "If you want a house in the city, if you want to be taken care of, pay for it yourselves. Stop expecting my parents to hand you everything." A thick, uncomfortable silence crashed over the room. Mrs. Miller's face twisted in fury. "Curtis, are you hearing this? This is the woman you're about to marry, talking like we're some kind of beggars. Since when did her family's money become more important than ours? A married couple shares everything, doesn't she understand that?" Curtis's face paled. His voice rose in alarm. "Natalie, you can't say things like that. Apologize to my parents." Natalie's sharp gaze turned on him, her voice as cold as steel. "Curtis, if you actually believe that, then take your parents and get out of my house. My parents bought this for me. Not you. Not them." Curtis's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist. Natalie, come on. You always throw these little tantrums and I always let it go. But can't you show my parents just a little respect? Natalie yanked her arm away, turning her back on him completely. Mrs. Miller let out a bitter laugh. You should be grateful to be marrying a man like Curtis. You think you're too good for us? Look at yourself. You're selfish, spoiled, and completely lacking in respect. Frankly, I don't think you're even good enough for my son. She spun toward Curtis, eyes blazing. Do you see now? She looks down on us just like all these city folks do. Natalie met her glare head-on, voice steady. We're not even married yet and you're already trying to claim what isn't yours. That's not family, that's greed. Curtis wiped his forehead, his face tense. Natalie, that was way out of line. You need to apologize. Mr. Miller took a slow step forward, exhaling smoke in our direction. His gaze settled on Thomas and me, his voice curling with mockery. Thomas, I have to ask, how exactly did you raise your daughter? Because I'm seeing a serious lack of discipline here. She's got no respect, no humility. Always throwing around my house, my house. It's exhausting to hear. He took another drag from his cigarette, exhaling slowly. You wouldn't be looking down on us country folk now, would you? His eyes narrowed as he added almost lazily, you know, Curtis didn't turn out like this on his own. He had to be disciplined as a boy. Tough love, real parenting. That's why he's polite, hardworking, humble. That's why he has a future in the city. He smiled, but it was sharp, humorless. Once your daughter marries into our family, she'll learn her place too. Curtis will teach her how to behave. He'll make sure of it. Curtis stood frozen beside him, silent. And then he nodded. A small, nearly imperceptible movement. But I saw it. We all did. And in that moment, something in Natalie's eyes changed. Thomas stared at the Millers, completely stunned. In all his years he had never encountered a family this brazen, this shameless. I couldn't hold back anymore. The rage surged to my head and I let it explode. How we raise our daughter is none of your damn business. And you have the audacity to lecture us. I stepped closer, my voice sharp and unwavering. You couldn't contribute a dime to the wedding. You don't have a house. You don't have a car. You brought absolutely nothing to this marriage. And now you have the nerve to act like this house belongs to you. I glared at Curtis. Your son, what exactly does he bring to the table besides obedience? He relies on us for everything, so tell me, where does he get the right to make demands? The Millers stood there, momentarily stunned, as if no one had ever dared put them in their place before. Then after a beat, Mr. Miller snapped. Enough. You done talking? So what if we don't have money? Your daughter wasn't exactly hard to win over, was she? She practically threw herself at Curtis. His tone turned mocking, his smile sharp and mean. You think we don't know why? She's past her prime. If she were really worth anything, you wouldn't have to bribe a man to marry her with a house and gifts. Let's be honest, you knew she had no better options. Natalie's entire body stiffened. Her hands curled into fists, her chest rising and falling with rapid breaths. I knew what she was thinking. For years she had worried about Curtis feeling insecure. She never flaunted her family's wealth. She never bought herself luxury items around him. Every dinner, every movie date she paid pretending it was nothing. And yet here they were, twisting her kindness into desperation. Natalie took a deep, shaking breath. Then her voice cut through the room, calm and steady. Mom, Dad, I'm not marrying him. Thomas and I turned to her. Her eyes were clear, her voice unwavering. I mean it. She glanced at Curtis, then back at us. You were right. We come from completely different worlds and this was never going to work. I knew this wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. She had seen the truth, the real truth, not the illusion of love she had been clinging to. We had sensed it too, how things between them had been unraveling for months. But today this moment had been the final straw. Mrs. Miller wasn't ready to give up. She let out a cold laugh. Oh please, don't act like you're the victim here. Even if you call off the wedding, my son would never take you back. Natalie didn't even spare her a glance. She turned to Curtis, her voice as sharp as ice. Take your parents and leave. We're done. Curtis panicked, reaching for her wrist. Nat, come on. Don't do this. Don't be so stubborn. She yanked her arm away like his touch burned her. Don't touch me. Mr. Miller let out a derisive laugh. Look at you, Curtis. Pathetic. She's not even your wife yet and you can't control her. If you let this slide, she'll walk all over you for the rest of your life. His voice dropped into a sneer. Are you even a man? And that was it. I snapped. I grabbed the glass from the table and slammed it onto the floor. The crash echoed through the house, leaving an eerie ringing silence in its wake. Then Thomas moved. With a roar of pure fury, he lunged forward and threw a solid punch at Mr. Miller's face. The impact sent Mr. Miller staggering backward, slamming into the wall before he collapsed onto the floor, choking on his own breath. A dark red bruise was already blooming across his cheek. Mrs. Miller shrieked. You're crazy. That was assault. Thomas stood over him, his voice low and menacing. Say another word and you won't make it out of this house. Curtis stood frozen, his face ghostly pale. He didn't dare move. I stepped forward and for the first time Curtis looked afraid. His voice wavered. I only said that because she was disrespecting my parents. If she apologizes, maybe we can just forget about all this. Before he could finish, Thomas's palm cracked across Curtis's face, the force sending him stumbling backward onto the floor. A bright red handprint bloomed across his cheek. He clutched it, stunned, eyes wide in disbelief. You bastard, Thomas snarled. That was for Natalie. That was for every word you let them say about her. Curtis scrambled backward, his breath coming in panicked gasps, looking like a trapped rat. Mr. Miller, still dazed, started pushing himself up when Thomas turned back to him. Mr. Miller paled. You lay another hand on me, I'll call the cops. You'll go to jail for this. Thomas grabbed him by the collar and yanked him up, lifting him clean off the ground. Shut up. Mr. Miller struggled, his legs kicking helplessly, his shoes tumbling off. Let me go, you psycho. Thomas leaned in, his voice razor sharp. I see you now for what you really are. Even if Natalie wanted to marry into your family, I would never allow it. Mr. Miller was shaking now, his bravado completely shattered. Thomas tightened his grip. My daughter is smart, beautiful, and capable. She doesn't need your son. In fact, she's too good for him. His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. You couldn't pay for a wedding. You couldn't buy them a house. And the moment you walked in here, you disrespected everything we gave them. You tracked dirt onto our floors, smoked in our rooms, and acted like we owed you something. So let me make this clear. He shoved Mr. Miller back, letting him drop to the floor like a discarded rag. We're not giving you a damn thing. Now get out of my house. Mr. Miller, now trembling, nodded furiously. Thomas kicked his shoe toward him. Pick it up and go. Mr. Miller scrambled to his feet, nearly tripping over himself as he ran toward the door. I crossed my arms, smirking. Look at him. Running off and leaving his wife and son behind. Mrs. Miller, still stunned, suddenly grabbed Curtis's arm and dragged him toward the exit. At the door, she couldn't resist one last parting shot. You'll regret this. Curtis could have any woman he wants. Girls would line up for him. Your daughter will end up alone. I took a step forward and she bolted. As they rushed down the steps, one of them must have tripped, because suddenly all three of them went tumbling down the front stairs, arms and legs flailing. The loud thuds echoed across the driveway. Thomas sighed, shaking his head as he watched them groan on the pavement. Serves them right. I had thought that once Natalie ended things with Curtis, she would finally be free of that family's nonsense and move on with her life. But clearly I had underestimated just how low they were willing to sink. That evening, when Natalie came home from work, she was visibly upset. She didn't say a word, just walked in and set her bag down with a deep sigh. I frowned. What's wrong? Without a word, she handed me her phone. He actually emailed me. Curtis. Natalie had already blocked him on every possible platform. Calls, texts, social media. Yet somehow he had found a way to weasel back into her life. Thomas and I leaned in, scrolling through the email. The subject line was simple. Natalie, since we've broken up, it's only fair that you pay me back what you owe. Thomas's eyebrows shot up. You borrowed money from him? Natalie let out a dry, humorless laugh. Check the attachment. We clicked on the file and my blood pressure nearly doubled. It was a spreadsheet. A meticulously organized, itemized list of every single dollar he had ever spent on her over the course of their relationship. Tuesday, Starbucks. 2 coffees. $11.80. Valentine's Day flowers. $20. Uber ride last weekend, $14. Birthday gift card, $200. Dining out 12 times, total, $1,770. Split evenly, $885. Line after line, neatly laid out, tracking a full year of expenses like she was some kind of investment he wanted a return on. And at the bottom in bold, total, $2,897.36. I'll be generous. Just send me $2,897 and we'll call it even. Thomas and I stared at the screen, utterly speechless. I could feel the heat rising to my face. My hands curled into fists. This man had no shame. Did he really think we didn't know the truth? For nearly every dinner, movie, or trip they had taken, Natalie had been the one pulling out her credit card. Curtis had treated our family to dinner once, and it was at a damn fast food chain. On his birthday, Natalie had bought him the latest iPhone, spending over $1,200. On her birthday, all she got was a $200 gift card. And let's not forget last year when his father had a health scare. I was the one who went to the hospital with a $1,500 gift. But now he wanted to bill her? The audacity. And to top it all off, the email ended with a not-so-subtle threat. If you don't pay up, I'll have no choice but to go to your workplace and settle this in person. Settle what, exactly? This wasn't just absurd. It was pathetic. The moment the elevator doors slid open, I immediately knew something was wrong. A crowd had gathered near the lobby, murmuring and pointing toward the entrance. The air buzzed with anticipation like people were watching some kind of spectacle. And right in the center of it all, Curtis and his parents. Curtis himself was hunched in the corner, his head down as if trying to shrink out of sight. But his parents, they were shouting like they were leading some kind of street protest. Mrs. Miller's shrill voice rang through the air. "Where is your supervisor? I want to see a manager. We're here for Natalie, she owes my son money and refuses to pay up." The gathered employees exchanged puzzled glances, whispering among themselves. More people trickled in, drawn by the commotion. And then, the moment Natalie and I stepped out of the elevator, the entire floor fell silent. All eyes snapped to us. Mrs. Miller, spotting Natalie, immediately pointed a finger and raised her voice another octave. "Everyone listen up. This woman, your coworker, dated my son for a whole year. She spent his money, enjoyed his generosity, and now that they've broken up, she thinks she can just walk away without paying him back? You tell me, is that fair?" The whispering resumed, louder than before. "Wait, is that true? I thought she came from money? Isn't her dad some executive at Granite Group? What if all that was just an act?" Natalie's entire face turned red. I could feel her shoulders trembling. She had never been in a situation like this, humiliated in public, treated like some con artist. She had always been poised, professional, well-respected. And now, in an instant, Curtis's family had reduced her to a spectacle. I stepped forward, gently placing a hand on her back, reassuring her. I had this. I squared my shoulders, crossed my arms, and fixed my gaze on Mrs. Miller. And just like that, the moment I stepped in, their arrogance wavered. They had already felt Thomas's wrath once before. They knew what I was capable of. Still, Mrs. Miller puffed up her chest, trying to salvage her performance. "We just want what's fair. Your daughter owes my son money and we're here to collect." I arched an eyebrow, my voice cool and cutting. "Oh, since we're making such a public scene, let's clarify. Exactly how much does she owe you?" Mrs. Miller hesitated for half a second, then straightened her back. A lot of money. How much exactly?" I pressed. She flinched slightly, but then squared her shoulders and practically shouted. $2,897.36. The room froze. A beat of complete silence. And then, a burst of laughter. "Wait, what? This whole mess? Over less than 3,000? I thought she owed him hundreds of thousands or something. And did she just say, 36 cents? Who even calculates like that?" The whispers turned to outright mockery. Mrs. Miller's expression faltered, but Mr. Miller stepped up, determined to salvage their dignity. He reached behind him and pulled out a giant poster board, holding it up like some bizarre protest sign. "This is a full breakdown of every single expense. My son paid for her coffee, her movie tickets, her dinners. Look at the numbers." He started reading off transactions, his voice booming like he was presenting a corporate budget report. But the more he talked, the more the crowd reacted. Dude, is he seriously itemizing every cup of coffee? Wait. Valentine's Day flowers. $20. Is that a joke? Man, even my cheapest ex wasn't this bad. He kept a record of every coffee? That's not budgeting, that's psycho behavior. And then, Curtis muttered something under his breath. I only kept track for financial planning. It wasn't about being petty. That only made things worse. The laughter exploded. I knew this was my moment. I stepped forward, holding my voice loud and clear. All right. Since they're demanding payment, let's do this properly. I pulled out my checkbook. The room hushed. With deliberate slowness, I wrote a check for $3,000, making sure everyone saw the amount. Then with a casual flick of my wrist, I tossed it toward Curtis. The check fluttered through the air and landed at his feet. There. Every penny you claim we paid in full. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Miller lunged for the check, snatching it up. For a second she looked victorious. Until I smiled. Now Curtis, I drawled, my voice razor sharp. Since we're settling debts, let's talk about what you owe Natalie. Curtis froze. His face drained of color. He knew exactly what I meant. And the moment I said it, the crowd did too. Mrs. Miller shrieked, her voice shrill with desperation. What money? That's nonsense. I let out a cold laugh. Really? Let's go over the numbers, shall we? I met her gaze, unfazed. For Curtis's birthday, my daughter bought him a brand new phone. $1,200. When his father fell ill, I personally brought a gift worth $1,500. I have the receipts right here. I pulled out my phone and tapped on the screen. And these are just the expenses we can verify. That's already more than $2,500, not including all the other everyday costs we haven't accounted for. I turned to the crowd, raising my voice just enough to let it carry. Tell me, everyone, shouldn't he pay that money back? The response was immediate. Of course he should. That's way more than what they're demanding from her. Talk about hypocrisy. The chorus of agreement was thunderous, and the Millers flinched, their faces pale and stiff. Mrs. Miller, still clinging to whatever scraps of dignity she had left, huffed defiantly. You're making this up. Lies. Slander. And that was when Natalie finally stepped forward. Her patience had snapped. If you don't want to acknowledge the truth, fine. Let's take this somewhere else. Her voice was sharp and unwavering. Asterisk asterisk. She turned, her gaze locking onto Curtis. How about we go to your office, stand outside your company and put this on display for your colleagues to see? Would you like that, Curtis? The color drained from his face instantly. His company was just 2 floors above us. There was no running from this. Mrs. Miller's face twisted in fury. You ungrateful little. And then she lunged. Her hand swung up, aiming straight for Natalie's face. But I was ready this time. The moment her arm moved, I stepped forward, placing myself between them. My voice was low, calm, and unwavering. You better put that hand down. A chilling silence settled over the room. Mrs. Miller's arm froze midair. Her face locked in a stiff, stunned expression. I didn't blink. I didn't waver. I simply stared her down. And then, slowly, deliberately, I shifted my gaze to Curtis. You came here to cause a scene, but all you've done is tear apart whatever little dignity you had left. Curtis stared at the floor, silent, defeated. I took a deep breath and then turned to the gathered employees. But instead of addressing them, I spoke to Natalie. Let's go. We're taking this to his company's management and handling it professionally. No yelling. No threats. Just calm, decisive action. Without another word, we turned and walked toward the elevator. We didn't look back. We didn't need to. The damage had already been done. The supervisor arrived quickly, his expression polite but puzzled. Can you tell me what's going on? He asked, glancing between us and the growing crowd. I pulled out Curtis's own email, the one he had so eagerly sent demanding money. Holding it out, I calmly summarized the situation. We're not here to argue. My voice was steady, unwavering. We simply want a fair resolution. The supervisor skimmed the email, his frown deepening as I continued explaining. Then just as I finished, one of his assistants stepped up and whispered something in his ear. His eyes flickered toward me, a shift in his demeanor almost instantaneous. "Excuse me, are you Mrs. Dawson from Granite & Co.?" I nodded, offering a composed smile. "That's me." Immediately his posture straightened. His tone became formally polite, even apologetic. "I sincerely regret that this situation has escalated to such a level. Our company takes professionalism and ethical behavior very seriously. I'll be speaking to Curtis privately to address this." Then he turned to Curtis, and his tone hardened. "Curtis, I am truly disappointed. Keeping detailed accounts of personal expenses, demanding repayment after a breakup, and causing a public disturbance outside another company's office? This is completely inappropriate." Curtis's face went ghost white. He opened his mouth, scrambling for an excuse. I didn't think it would turn into this. The supervisor cut him off. "You have not only embarrassed yourself, but you've also damaged this company's image. This will be reported to HR." Curtis visibly shrank, his head dipping lower and lower, his hands twisting together as he nodded weakly. His arrogance, his entitlement, completely gone. I nodded, offering the supervisor a polite thank you. It was done. I turned to Natalie, ready to leave. But just as we took a step, "Wait, this isn't over." The sharp, grating voice of Mrs. Miller sliced through the air. I paused, then slowly turned back, fixing her with a calm, unreadable stare. I didn't need to say anything, because at that moment, everyone knew exactly who had already won. A few weeks passed and life finally seemed to return to normal. Natalie settled back into her routine. Work, coffee dates with friends, weekend yoga sessions. She looked better, lighter, no longer carrying the weight of past stress on her shoulders. Thomas and I had an unspoken agreement not to bring up Curtis or anything that had happened. We didn't want to risk reopening wounds that were still healing. He was doing well. At least in front of us, she made sure everything appeared in order. Until that night. She walked in with takeout in hand, but something in her expression was off. I glanced at her while setting the table. "Work okay?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. She hesitated, then wordlessly handed me her phone. He reached out again. The screen displayed a text from an unknown number, but the words were painfully familiar. "Curtis. Natalie, I've been thinking a lot lately. I know I messed up. I shouldn't have listened to my parents, and I should never have taken my frustration out on you. I have nothing now, but I want to start over. Will you give me another chance?" I exhaled slowly and looked up at her. "This is the third one." Her voice was quiet. "I haven't responded." I nodded. "Good. Silence is the clearest answer." She sighed. I don't understand. Is he actually sorry, or does he just hate losing?" "Probably both," I said, my voice even. "But that's not your problem anymore. His growth isn't your responsibility." She stared out the window, saying nothing. I knew her heart wasn't wavering. It wasn't love she was struggling with. It was habit. The emotional residue of investing so much into someone, only to realize they were never worth it. Then just a few days later, things took a turn. That evening she walked in with a different look. Not sadness, but something colder. Sharper. She set her phone on the counter. "Mom, look at this." I picked it up, and the moment my eyes landed on the screen, my stomach twisted. A social media post. An anonymous message. Attached was a blurred photo and edited video clips, carefully pieced together to paint a false narrative. The caption was nothing short of vicious. "Real-life gold digger. Extorted her ex after the breakup. Bragged about her wealthy background. Guess she's not so untouchable now, huh?" A slow, simmering rage built in my chest. "Do we even need to guess who did this?" She shook her head. "I can't trace the account, but look at the content. These pictures, these clips. It's all from Curtis. He cropped himself out, used an anonymous account, but we both know." I clenched my jaw. "So now he's resorting to this." She let out a slow breath, the exhaustion settling in. "I just wanted to move on. Why can't he let me?" I took her hand, squeezing it firmly. "Because he's not stuck on you, he's stuck on his own ego. He's not capable of moving forward, so all he knows how to do is drag people backward." That very night, I reached out to an old college friend, now a lawyer at a well-known firm. By the next morning, we had formally issued a legal notice demanding the removal of the anonymous defamatory content, along with a request to preserve the poster's IP information for potential legal action. We also filed a civil harassment report, ensuring there was now an official record of Curtis's actions. For the moment, things seemed to settle. But Curtis wasn't done. A week later, Natalie received a package in the mail. Inside was a handwritten letter from Curtis. The tone dripped with regret, self-blame, and nostalgia. He wrote about their first date, the way she smiled, the nights she stayed up caring for his sick father. Every line carefully crafted to tug at her emotions. But then the last few sentences revealed the truth. I can't accept you walking away completely. You know I have nothing left. You were my only light. If you don't come back, I don't know what I might do. This wasn't an apology. This was emotional blackmail. My expression darkened as I read the final words. Without hesitation, I called our lawyer and started the process to file for a restraining order. That afternoon, Natalie and I went to the courthouse together. She sat on a bench, gripping the letter so tightly her knuckles turned white. Mom. Her voice was quiet, strained. I know I'm handling this the right way. But why does it still feel so exhausting? I placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not tired. You're healing. And that takes time. But you're already doing everything right. She exhaled slowly, then met my gaze. For the first time, there was no hesitation in her eyes. I won't let him hurt me again. I smiled. That's my daughter. A few weeks later, the court officially approved the temporary restraining order, legally barring Curtis from contacting or approaching Natalie in any way. We also provided all supporting evidence to Granite & Co.'s legal team, ensuring there was a record on file in case of any future issues. This time we weren't waiting for him to apologize. We weren't giving him a single chance to reappear in our lives. Natalie had finally broken free. She was no longer the girl who tiptoed around someone else's emotions. No longer the girlfriend who compromised, apologized, or tried to fix someone who refused to change. She had stepped fully into her own life. And without realizing it, she had begun to move beyond the limits she once set for herself. She poured herself into work, no longer letting emotions derail her focus. Instead of hesitating, she took on multiple projects at once, proving her ability to thrive under pressure. She knew what she wanted, and more importantly, what she no longer needed. Then came the regional business conference. Granite & Co. chose her to represent the firm at a major industry networking event. She took the stage, standing tall, delivering a presentation with confidence and precision. The audience, executives, investors, and industry leaders, listened. They nodded in approval. And by the end, several corporate representatives from across state lines approached her, eager to exchange business cards, hoping to explore future collaborations. That one event subtly but irreversibly shifted the course of her career. And with it, her life. At a casual networking luncheon after the conference, Natalie was introduced to Ethan Parker. Ethan was one of the co-founders of East Bay Capital, a MIT graduate, and a member of a well-known San Francisco business family. But unlike the arrogance often associated with privilege, he was thoughtful, articulate, and composed. Their conversation was brief. No unnecessary small talk, no intentional exchange of contacts. Just a natural, unforced discussion before they both moved on with their day. But the following week, Natalie received a letter, handwritten. It wasn't a grand declaration, nor an eager invitation. It was a genuine thank you note, acknowledging the strength of her presentation and offering insightful feedback on her business model. Along with it, he included a book on leadership and strategy, something he thought she might find interesting. She was surprised. Impressed even. I glanced at the letter and smirked. Well, at least this one didn't send you an invoice after the breakup. Natalie chuckled but didn't reply. Still, there was something different in her expression. A quiet ease that hadn't been there before. There were no sudden romantic pursuits, no hurried advances. Over time, their conversations became more frequent but never forced. They exchanged industry insights, attended small business forums, and occasionally grabbed coffee to discuss market trends. Until one evening, Ethan was driving her home when he suddenly pulled the car to a stop. Turning to her, he said, "I don't know how you feel about me." His voice was steady, sincere. "But I want you to know I like you. Not because of your work, not because you're brilliant or independent. But because when I'm with you, it feels like life is something worth experiencing fully." Natalie froze for a second. She hadn't expected this moment. Not so soon, not so directly. She sat in silence, weighing his words, then finally she nodded. "I don't know what the future holds," she admitted softly. "But I'd like to find out." For the first time in her life, she entered a relationship without fear, without pretense, without hesitation. And to our surprise, Ethan soon introduced her to his parents. Mr. and Mrs. Parker were gracious, intelligent, and welcoming. They never pried into personal matters, never judged or scrutinized. Instead, they treated Natalie with the same respect they would any capable adult. At dinner, Mrs. Parker personally prepared a small dessert and smiled warmly. "This is the first time Ethan has ever invited someone home. I had to make sure I did it right." Later that evening, Ethan's father pulled Thomas aside and said quietly, "She's remarkable. Smart, poised, and she knows her own mind. We're glad Ethan met someone like her." There was no entitlement, no grasping demands, no pressure for submission. Just a family that valued genuine connection and mutual respect. It was everything Curtis's family wasn't. And for the first time we could all see it. Natalie was finally in a place where she was safe. Where she was cherished. But good things rarely go unnoticed. One afternoon, a photo surfaced online. A candid shot of Natalie and Ethan at a business event. With Ethan's family name, it didn't take long for the image to circulate within industry circles. And soon enough, the news reached Curtis. That evening, Natalie stepped out of her office, only to find Curtis waiting near the entrance. His face was pale, his expression twisted. "So this is it?" He took a step closer, voice low and burning with resentment. "You dumped me and ran straight into another man's arms?" Natalie didn't flinch. She met his gaze directly. "Curtis, walk away. You have no right to question me." His nostrils flared. "You were planning this all along, weren't you? Were you already with him when you were still with me?" Her voice turned to steel. "You need to stop. I have a restraining order against you. If you're following me, I'll call the police right now." Curtis's face twitched, his hands clenched at his sides. He was about to lash out again, when another presence stepped forward. From the parking lot, Ethan approached, his posture calm, his expression unreadable. But his presence alone shifted the air. He moved beside Natalie, his voice even yet firm. "I don't know who you are," Ethan said, "but if you take one more step toward her, I'll call the police myself." Curtis blinked, startled. He hadn't noticed Ethan arriving, and he certainly hadn't expected this confrontation. "You're the new boyfriend, huh?" His voice turned mocking, but there was a crack in his bravado. "You think you're better than me?" Ethan didn't rise to the bait. "It doesn't matter who I am," he said calmly. "What matters is that you understand she is no longer someone you can hurt." There was no yelling, no dramatic standoff, yet the weight of his words suffocated Curtis more than any fight ever could. For a moment, Curtis just stood there, staring at them, Natalie standing tall, untouched by his anger. Ethan, beside her, unshaken, immovable. And something broke inside him. He finally understood. The woman he had once criticized, belittled, controlled, was now standing in a different world, bathed in light he could never reach. And he didn't even have the right to stand beside her anymore. As they walked away, Curtis stood frozen, his face unreadable, a storm of rage, regret, and finality. But the world had moved on without him. And Natalie never looked back. After dinner, Natalie and I walked along the narrow path, our steps slow and unhurried. The gravel crunched softly beneath our feet, and behind us, the trees swayed in the evening breeze, their shadows flickering against the ground. This was a place we used to visit often. When she was little, she loved hopping across the smooth stones by the lake, making my heart leap every time she wobbled on the edge. I would reach out, gripping the sleeve of her jacket, trying to keep her steady. Now her steps were firm, measured. Her gaze was clear, steady. "Do you remember how I used to run into the water to collect stones?" she asked suddenly. I smiled. "Of course. You always said each one was unique, that you had to take them all home and wash them properly." She let out a soft laugh. "Back then I thought every little detail in the world was worth holding on to. And now," he paused, thoughtful, "now I know, some things are meant to stay in your heart, not in your life." I turned to look at her. She was no longer the little girl who panicked when things went wrong. "Mom." She spoke again, her voice quieter. "What do you think people spend their whole lives chasing?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I looked out at the water, where the sunlight reflected in soft, shifting ripples. "I think it's different for everyone. But for me, it's peace. She raised an eyebrow. Not happiness? I shook my head. Happiness is tricky. Sometimes it's just someone else's expectations. Sometimes it's just a fleeting rush. But peace? That's something you build for yourself. It's not given. And it's not something that happens overnight. She was quiet for a long moment, absorbing my words. Then, in a voice as soft as the evening air, she said, I used to think I had to be loved by someone else to feel like my life had meaning. But no. I think learning to love myself is the most important thing. That's enough. I nodded. That's more than enough. She smiled at me. You've always known this, haven't you? I didn't answer. I just held her gaze. And in that moment I knew she didn't need me to shield her anymore. She had learned how to stand in the wind, to listen to the water, to hear the voices of the world, and decide for herself which ones mattered. We kept walking side by side along the lake's edge. In the distance, a few ducks drifted lazily across the water, their movements sending gentle ripples outward, one after another. And suddenly it struck me, this path we had walked countless times before. The difference was, back then she had always looked to me to find her way. Now she could walk it on her own. But every now and then she still chose to reach for her mother's hand. And that was enough.
I'm Natalie. And once, I truly believed that love could overcome everything. When I first met Curtis, he was quiet, reserved. He carried himself with a sense of seriousness that made him seem more mature than the guys around him. I mistook that restraint for depth. I mistook his frugality for a practical, grounded approach to life. Even when friends gently warned me that he was stingy, I dismissed it as harsh judgment. The first time he took me out to dinner, it was at a fast food chain. He ordered the cheapest meal on the menu and told me, "Don't order too much, it's wasteful." I smiled, said it was fine, and convinced myself that this was simply a man who valued practicality. He never gave gifts. On Valentine's Day, he Venmo'd me $5.20, joking that it's the thought that counts. And I was touched. I thought it was charming, minimalist, a mature kind of romance. It took me far too long to realize that his so-called practicality was just greed in disguise. I never once kept score when it came to gifts. For his birthday, I bought him a brand new iPhone. When mine came around, he handed me a $200 gift card, telling me to get myself something nice, and then, with a straight face, added, "Couples shouldn't measure love with money." And I, like a fool, nodded along. He didn't have a car, so I drove. He didn't have a place, so I said it didn't matter. He told me he couldn't afford a ring yet, so I secretly picked one out myself, had my best friend buy it, so I could surprise him on our wedding day. Now, looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. And that was only the beginning. The first time I visited his home, his mother barely glanced at me before coldly asking, "Do you cook?" Before I could respond, she added, "City girls don't belong in kitchens." But let me make it clear, that won't work in our family. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, and said, "I can cook, and I'd love to learn more." She didn't smile. She simply huffed, as if confirming something to herself. I thought if I was kind enough, sincere enough, she would eventually accept me. I didn't realize that was just the beginning of her endless tests and criticisms. She mocked my clothes, saying I dressed too flashy. She mocked my career, saying a woman who's too ambitious is hard to control. She mocked my personality, saying I wasn't soft enough to be a good wife. Curtis? He never defended me. All he ever said was, "That's just how she is, don't take it personally." At the time, I thought he was keeping the peace. Now, I realize, he was just a coward. His father was even more blunt. "You won't have time for a job once you start having kids. No need to waste energy thinking about a career." They believed I shouldn't have personal ambitions, shouldn't have my own space, shouldn't even have my own opinions. And God help me, I told myself to endure it. I thought, things will change after we're married. But the moment that snapped me awake was the house. Curtis told me he couldn't afford a home, so I offered to let my parents gift us a house as part of my dowry. He didn't hesitate. He smiled, ran to tell his parents. And that was when they showed their true colors. His mother immediately declared, "We'll take the master bedroom. The second bedroom will be for Luca, our grandson. And Travis and his family will move in, too." I tried to be rational. I tried to talk it through. She laughed in my face. "Your mother bought you a big house, that's lucky for you. But that doesn't mean you get a say in it." "Curtis?" He stood there, silent. Later, when I confronted him, he pulled me aside and whispered, "She's just talking, don't take it so seriously." And that was the moment I finally saw it. I was never their daughter-in-law. I was a resource. A house, a wallet, a convenient outsider who could provide, but never be respected. And the most absurd part? After we broke up, Curtis spread rumors at work, calling me cold, entitled, and materialistic. Then, he had the audacity to send me an invoice, listing every coffee, every meal, every ride he'd ever paid for, demanding I repay him $3,000. I laughed. I really laughed. The same girl who bought her own engagement ring was now being branded a gold digger? So I transferred the full amount to him. Not because I owed him, but because I wanted to shut the door on that chapter forever. And after that, his life unraveled. He was fired from his job. His family's reputation took a hit. Every resume he sent out was met with silence. People said he looked drained, miserable, lost. I wouldn't know. Because by then, I stopped caring. Sometimes, I think about the girl I used to be, the one who silenced herself for the sake of love, who sacrificed her boundaries, who kept convincing herself to endure just a little longer. And yes, it hurts to remember her. But more than anything, I feel free. Because now, I understand. A real relationship is not one person constantly making up for the other's shortcomings. I was never his savior. I was never his family's financial plan. I walked away. And I lived better. And him? He was devoured by his own greed, his own selfishness. This is my quietest, most dignified revenge. Not screaming. Not plotting. Not even hating. Just living a life he can never touch. This time, I bow to no one. This time, I walk forward only for myself.